and organic produce. And then they all come together to work with others, other like citizens, town planners, agronomists, architects, and so on. And they came up with labels, but not anymore thinking in terms only of food, but they call it territorial poles of economic cooperation. And they have given labels to cooperatives and others to develop dynamic agroecological and working for the ecological transition on the territory. And they are making a cartography with all of that. Okay. Now going to resilience and peace. So first of all, as you know, those who work on humanitarian development, there has been a shift in thinking because there are so many crises and protracted conflicts. That means that they never end, or you reach a peace agreement and then you fall back into violence. That the lines between humanitarian aid and development are completely blurred. So you need new solutions, which are called hybrid ones. And you need more and more the participation of civil society, other stakeholders, and also businesses. So in working for the ILO on a research on and literature review of where do we find cooperatives, how do they contribute to crises, to solve them? Well, we found them everywhere. So now we think in terms of 4 phases, facing every crisis, whether it's a natural disaster, a global financial crisis, and so on, or climate change. So first you have the shock. And cooperatives, for example, Japanese cooperatives from developed countries, but also in developing countries, they help, they make donations, they give legal advice, and then they integrate the population, displaced and refugees. And they provide health services, social services, training, work, jobs. And then when they go after the recovery, they create sustainable livelihoods. And then they can provide as well microinsurance and participate in preparedness for the possible, hopefully not, but probably another future crisis. In terms of peace, where do we find cooperatives? There are currently 2 main conceptualizations of peace, what we call liberal peace and positive peace. So liberal peace is, it's a liberal conception of the market. So we promote market reforms, and we expect large businesses or like foreign direct investment to come in and then invest, create jobs, and build infrastructure. So this is mostly linked to liberal peace. We don't find a lot of academic production, theory, and examples of cooperatives there. But we do find them on the other side. So Galtung, since the 1960s, came up with the idea it's not enough to talk about peace as such, because it's not after every war or violence that we need to talk about peace. We need to talk beforehand. So how can we live peacefully? How can we build a peaceful living, a peaceful opportunities for everybody? And he came up with this formula. So we need to increase empathy and equality, equity, so that we can deal with trauma and conflict before it becomes violent. So when I did research on cooperatives, like in Rwanda and Nicaragua, the first hypothesis I found in the literature was that cooperatives appear after conflicts, after violence. They will give jobs to the ex-combatants, to refugees and displaced people. But when I went to Rwanda and Nicaragua, actually I found that they appeared later. There were cooperatives after, let's say, the crisis or the genocide, but most of them, they appeared quite a few years later. And they provided a transformative role for the people, for the members, and for the communities, where people felt safe, and they felt safe to rebuild their lives and also to reconciliate. And also I found in different countries like Nicaragua, but also in Sri Lanka and Nepal, and of course in Rwanda, cooperatives with people from both sides of the conflict working together. And in the case of Nicaragua, during the conflict, they would go outside to kill each other. And this is true, right? And they would come together to build electrical lines. And there was a member in the ICA board that now has retired from the US, who was at that time there in electrical cooperatives. And he said it was true. So during the conflict and after the conflict. So I don't have time, but cooperatives had multiple positive impacts in the community and also rebuilt the exports of the country when nobody would go to the country after the genocide. So they rebuilt the coffee sector, the tea sector, the crafts, so many activities, but also allowed the women and the men, of course, to study their children. They had access for the first time to mutuals, health services, and so on. They talked about Ubuntu and Seriti and their visions how to build a peaceful life together. And cooperatives were bridging individual and collective action, transforming reflexivity and dialogue and reconciliation into agency. And this is something you cannot read, but maybe you will access later through the PowerPoint. It's a photo I took of a panel in the Kigali Memorial that recognizes, acknowledges the role of cooperatives in building the foundations of a peaceful future in Rwanda. These are just some pictures of a Maraba cooperative that I visited. I don't have time to go into that. This is about Nicaragua to show again that, okay, they went through a revolution. It was more an uprising. Then they had a war, a contra-war. There was again violent conflict in the 1990s during a neoliberal government, but cooperatives appeared later, much later. And then suddenly they went up several thousand of them, and they still are there. So in the beginning, like half of them were not active, but now there are about 6,000, half of which are in rural areas, mainly farmers, engaging in sustainable and ecological transition. And also, for example, sustainable tourism, community tourism. Also, I saw that in Rwanda. And craft, I will show you pictures. Uh, the other half is like mainly between housing cooperatives and women cooperatives. These are some pictures. And one interesting thing I found both in Rwanda and Nicaragua is that there are cooperatives which are the only ones in the world to keep ancestral knowledge in terms of ceramics. Here is like black ceramics. It's unique and it's several thousand years old, the knowledge. And I think that's also a huge impact in terms of what cooperatives do for communities. Now, I'm going to end a couple of more slides about policy co-production. This is another big shift taking on. Before we used to talk, we need to lobby to have a proper policy, a proper regulation, give feedback. This is not the case anymore. We have so many crises and we have a huge needs to achieve the SDGs, a sustainable planet for us and for future generations. And therefore, the civil society and businesses are called to what we call policy co-production. This comes mainly from Bourgogne. She is an official from Canada. She worked in the OECD. And in 2011, she made an important contribution and then on with several books. So, but here in co-production, mainly the people are called during the implementation phase of policies to contribute and maybe to do part of that as well. And then there is another concept which is very, very important, policy co-creation. This is also from Canadians like Tremblay and Vaillancourt. And what it means is that civil society and economic actors are called to participate beforehand. So during deliberation, giving arguments in favor, against, taking part from the very beginning in the policy process and in the definition of what are the priorities and the possible actions to take. So the public policy process is changing because of our reality, our challenges. And this makes visible the collective action and the civil society actors. While governments, of course, remain as the main custodian of the public interest and or the common general interest. But the potential to participate is both regional, national, and global. So you have to be aware of that because you have to step up, not only in academia, but you have to link with the real economy actors, the cooperatives, and with that knowledge together, you can take part in these processes. So you can contribute with solutions. So I will give you just 3 examples very briefly. You have 2 interesting institutions in Uruguay and Costa Rica, the INACOP and the INFOCOP. These are national institutes where you have the state officials in charge of cooperatives together with representatives of the cooperative movement working together on policy, also supporting research, studies, and so on. You have in the Mercosur, which is a regional organization in the south of South America, with a unit since 2001 called RECMA, which is a specialized organism or organization on cooperatives. Again, you find them. From the member states of the organization, representatives of the state, and representatives of the cooperative confederations from the same member states. And they came together to talk what? How we build statistics, how we exchange best practices, what do we do during the pandemic, and so on. So this has been also very useful in different ways to come up with solutions and data that each country doesn't have. And then, of course, at the UN level, you have also consultations and possibilities to take part, like the Global Environmental Facility. To finish, well, I leave you with just some questions. Of course, how we lever the power of cooperative for sustainable development. Do we see sustainable development as goals that we reach and then that's okay? Or should we see it as a process? And then what are the role of the cooperative members in building our common future? And then in terms of research and teaching, this is actually a screenshot from a good work that when I give a full paper, I usually put all the references. Some key suggestions for researching and teaching for the future. One of the main things is that we need to come up with accounting for the true value of sustainable ways of living, housing, production, consumption, transportation. For example, how to stock solar energy and so on. And then how to promote sustainable livelihoods. So this is very important. This is the role that cooperatives take. How to strengthen the governance for the sustainable food production and consumption. How we link up between producers and consumers, like the cooperatives in coffee in Guatemala do between Pachamama cooperative, equal exchange cooperative in the Canada and the US, northern countries, linking up with cooperatives in the south and so on. And then to promote the assessment of life cycle. This means that we don't assess things at one point, but as a process, whether it's students' progress, whether it's academia, whether it's life in a cooperative, whether it's success in achieving our sustainable future. So, asante sana. Thank you.
Uh, can we clap again for Professor Sanchez? I think a louder one will make sense. Um, thank you, Professor. I've been discussing with my friends that professors are not made, they're not created, they are processed. And when they're processed, they become professors and they profess. And when you profess, that's almost like delivering the word of God to people. And that was the word of God. Thank you very much, Professor. Professor has covered a lot of areas, and we don't have that much time. Uh, but 5 key areas are important for us to recall. One, issues of sustainable development. Then second, current global context, cooperative as levers. And remember here, the levels are talking about the process and, of course, managing competition and whatever. Issues of sustainable development goals. And the professor is talking about issues of sustainable development goal as a process rather than a one-off issue. Now, at the moment, what we have in sustainable development goals is that we have the timeline, and the livelihood of a person does not have a timeline. If you have the goals for 5 years or 10 years, and the lifespan of most of us is around 60, then you can know there is a gap. And she's talking about the value chain, food system innovation, resilience and positive peace, policy, uh, policy reviews and production, revealing cooperative contribution. And at last, which is very important again for us as academicians and even practitioners, is the role of research and teaching. She's talking about several issues. One, if you're looking at the role of research, then you need to answer three major questions. One, how to tap the power of cooperatives. How can we do that? And remember, tapping here is relating cooperatives with the practice and what can happen in terms of livelihood development. Two, issues of sustainable development goals and process. And then when you look at these in more details, you can talk about shift in thinking, changes in solutions and whatever, and the digital world. So if you can promote sustainable development, that is fine, but that is part of the research. And to us is to look at the relationship. For example, can we really at this moment have true costs? What are the true cooperative costs? What are not true cooperative costs? So nowadays, the cooperatives are so intertwined with other areas of productivity that they end up losing that area. So, can we promote cooperatives and relate them with the livelihood cycle? Can we do that? Can we make cooperatives be livelihood changes? This is what the professor is focusing on. Now, we don't have that much time. We had 1 hour, but I know now has been reduced to almost like 45 minutes. But I think we can allow 2 or 3 people to talk, 5 minutes, 3 minutes, or 5 minutes each, and thereafter we can have the professor concluding. Can I have 1 or 2 lines? 1 or 2 people, or 3 people? Nobody is raising a hand. Professor Sifu, can you say something? Because we are the person who I can ask you to speak. Then I'll ask, what is Professor Mataba? He's not around. Yes? Can you give him the mic, please? Who is doing that? You allowed, yes? Yes. Yes, I had a hand here. Yes, sir. Your name, please, and your affiliation.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is George Okari. I'm from Global Communities. And Professor, this is great. We are doing a worker cooperative in Kenya called Funditech. But then when we started, it was very interesting because convincing workers to come together to form a worker cooperative was sounding old school. Now, this is to us sounding like real great. So the biggest question that we ask the professors is when you do such a great job and take it to the library, you don't see the linkage, the bridging between the research and how that is being implemented in our government systems. Thank you.
Yes. Can I have a third hand, please? Yes, sir. My good friend from Kenya, yes.
Yes. Thank you very much, Professor. Well, actually, it's not a question, but you have just told us about the Word of God. And I just want to reveal to you the signs of God that I met here. So first, my name is Suhail Said. I'm from Sudan. The war turned Sudan nowadays. And I was really, when I came here, I was really thinking of the role of cooperatives in food insecurity, because right now, according to scientists and people who are following the situation in my country, almost 55 to 60% of my population is threatened by food insecurity, which is exactly around 24 to 25 million. Plus, in addition to food insecurity, there is a ethnical and tribal division that is tearing us the whole country. Now, according to what you have just said, the role of cooperatives in food security insecurity through agriculture and also through what the minister had said earlier, plus the very important aspect of peace building. So that was a very good sign of God that I came here for the right place. Plus, out of a pure accident, I sat near my friend here, and I don't know him, and he happened to be from Rwanda, and he's going to present the papers on peace building and food insecurity in Rwanda. So
Thank you, thank you.
shukran. Thank you very much.
One more last hand. So, Professor, you have Professor Sanchez. I will call you, but you have three areas to capture. One is about student cooperatives, and I know Professor Sifa is really highly interested in this one. And then we have issues of global communities work. I think bridging the gap between the policy and the cooperative practices. And then the Sudan one is a key area. It's related to peace and security on the one hand, and what cooperatives can do. I know my good friend in Kohi knows much about this one. But the second is about food security. Food, peace, security. The three areas. Welcome. Can conclude your marks within 10 minutes, 5 minutes.
5 minutes.
Yes.
Well, thank you very much. I think so. The last comment. Well, I really hope you can help your country, and everybody else here can help him and the cooperatives and people in Sudan, so that peace can be fully achieved and remain long-standing there. And if I can do anything, of course, I would be happy to do so. The other two are questions about children cooperatives. Okay, this is a long-standing tradition that comes from actually started in the end of the 19th century, 20th century, when pedagogical thinkers in Europe started to rethink pedagogy for children, to do more active things and to learn how to do things, and not only theoretical concepts or history and the way they do it, it depends on each country. So generally, you will have, first of all, is volunteering. So you don't force the children to do that, but you explain to them, and in general, they would like to participate. So by class, for 1 year or one teaching period, they will form a cooperative, and they will decide what they want to do. So they will be guided by one or two teachers who will have trained on these processes, and they will know about cooperatives. And the children themselves will decide whether they want to do, like, I don't know, something on the internet, or make donations at the end to some cause, and they would like to raise money for that, or they want to do a theater production, or so it can be anything. They can, for example, make jams, or do something in a farm. I don't know where they are. It depends the country, the place, and the type of study they are doing. And in the end, they will probably either offer that to the families, to the community, they will share with them, or they will sell them, and they will decide what to do with the money, whether to buy books, whether to donate the money, whether to use it for a study trip It depends on them. They will also choose the cooperative authorities, so they among themselves. So they will manage as a cooperative. So it's like an extracurricular activity. And by doing that, they come together to also to learn how to manage in terms of money. I saw, for example, a group. So in a school, this was actually a Catholic school in Argentina. So the girls came in and they just they had a box with the money for the cooperative. So the president and the vice president they came in to take money to do something. So they have to be accountable for the money, how the money is raised, how it is used, and so on. So from the age of, let's say, about 8, 9, 10 years old until, let's say, 12, so mainly like primary school. Now, there are other possibilities. For example, in Switzerland, in the last year of school, they have sometimes courses for startups. And one of the options is to create a cooperative. So a group of students can come up for a year and say, okay, we establish a cooperative, and it's possible for them. They register, they open it, they run it, and it's closed at the end of the year. And then they have to account, and it's like they have to make a presentation on the experience. But it is possible. And there are also cooperatives of university students in housing, but also, for example, in consultancy in Holland, in the University of Amsterdam. So the students manage, in general, they are guided by lecturers at, at the higher level. And there are also another possibility, which is not cooperatives of children. At universities in Brazil, they created what is called solidarity incubators. And mainly students of masters and PhDs, they can choose, instead of going like to labs or startups like conventional enterprises, they can choose there and work with some professors, and they can support startups from the community. So they make calls, they have evaluations, they have to accompany, in the case of a cooperative, the groups, to make sure that it makes sense, evaluations and so on. And so it's an entire process of pre-incubation, incubation, and post-incubation. So they have established the entire process of incubation. So they learn how to incubate cooperative enterprises, and but also other types like associations, sometimes family enterprise. So that's for the children cooperatives. Governments. Well, I think the cooperatives have to step up. It depends how you talk to governments. Governments are interested in certain things, they have priorities and urgencies. So sometimes cooperatives have to come up and put together theoretical concepts so they know what they are talking about, how to talk to governments about what's happening in the world, in the country, and also the solutions they provide. How can that be funded? What are the risks? And how they can manage that or manage with other stakeholders. That's a possibility. Of course, there are other problems that we have that could be ideology, could be other interests that come in the way. But we should not be prejudiced in the sense that in different countries, we see people on the left and on the right that support cooperatives and understand the importance of cooperatives for their own countries. So never be prejudiced to talk to authorities because they want solutions for the country. And this is where if you prove and you come up with examples, solutions, they will consider them and they will support them. So it's not a question of ideology. So, just now, there is a gap in terms of academic production and there is a gap in terms of policy debates. However, I know people, like as I said, policy co-creation and co-production, when they are in the right meetings, the policy officers come to them and they said, write to me that. Give me the phrase that we need in that text. And it's in 2 hours' time, or maybe tonight or tomorrow. And you have to do it. So you need a lot of preparation for that as well. So when you have the trust, you also have to be prepared to be the best in providing a written solution, for a bill or a law or a regulation or a standard, etc. So I know people who have done this or are doing this, and therefore, you have to be ready to be able to provide support to the public authorities as well. I don't know if if that's enough, but I can stop here. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor. Thank you. Professor Sanchez has been in the cooperative sector for more than 25 years. She was born in an area where cooperatives are practiced. She's the father, the mother, the grandparents are Spain, Argentine, Italy. In all these areas, you note they're all cooperative, infiltrated. Everybody is a cooperator. So what she's talking today arises out of her experiences. I hope we have learned much. I am more grateful than when I talked about children cooperatives. I understand that most of us now have a lesson to learn. We have to ensure that student cooperatives emerge, and I know Professor Sife is highly interested in that. We have him, we have Professor Mataba there. A lot of people here are interested in that one. And I know I have been at the Cooperative University of Kenya. Nyamongo knows that he likes that one. So might be we have a way to start. She says we can start. And I say we can start. Thank you again, Professor, and thank you again, participants.
Thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen, those who are here in person and those following the meeting or the conference virtually. We have just concluded the parallel session. The timetable, because we just had our tea, I think we are full. And therefore, we are recommending that as from 13:35 to 14:30, we go for breakout sessions. And thereafter, 14:30 to 15 hours, we can have our lunch. Thereafter, we proceed with our 15:30 to 16:15. Is it understood? Okay, thank you. So we are now breaking up for the breakout session. We are now going for breakout sessions, and I argue the breakout chairpersons to lead the delegations to the rooms, and I want to ask those who are coming from Moku, specifically Beatrice Kimaro, Dr. Gresham Rwekaza, Dr. Cyril Komba, Dr. Faustine Panga, to lead the delegations to the breakout sessions rooms. Most of the rooms are located just after the road, the other side of this conference room, but council chamber is located to the administrative block B, to the administrative block B. So please let us go to the breakout sessions as we are behind time set. Before we go to the breakout sessions, there is Okay.
Yes. Thank you. Before we go for the breakout sessions, I would like to request Professor John Safari, our Deputy Vice Chancellor, Academic Research and Consultancy, to do something that he was supposed to do before, but because of the nature of the scenario, it was not possible to do it then. Professor Safari, karibu.
Asante sana. Ladies and gentlemen, I have the honor to introduce to you Mr. Jumaine Tambalike, the CEO of Sahara Ventures and our keynote speaker. Mr. Jumaine, please. Asante sana.
Thank you very much, Professor. As our MC said, we have 6 venues and we are going to break for the parallel sessions. We have lecture room 1, lecture room 2. We have our presenters who are based at the university. They will lead us to these lecture rooms and other venues. So if you know that you are interested in a particular venue, you can simply ask those who are going to these venues and they will be of great assistance. But as said, after these parallel sessions, we will have lunch. Then we will go for the other parallel sessions. So let us please proceed without any further delay. Thank you and wish you all the best in the presentations.